deal. They had two witnesses. And before I start, I have no idea who this woman is. They have a picture from, they say, about 40 years ago, a picture. And the picture depicts her and her husband on a celebrity line where I was the celebrity. I was been a celebrity for a long time. And they were shaking my hands along with hundreds of other people. Nobody even knows where it is. The problem is she doesn't know the date of this incident. She doesn't know when. She doesn't know, was it in the 90s? Could it have been further than that? She has no idea when. And people do that because you don't want to give a specific date, and then you find out that Trump or whoever it was in Europe. So they tend to do that. They take long periods so that this way, hopefully he was in New York at that time. But this is a disgraceful case, and disgraceful in particular because it's about a former president of the United States who is now leading in the polls to be the president again. And this is being worked with the DOJ, Department of Justice, as are all of these cases. They all come out. Atlanta, Fani, that is all Department of Justice. Nobody knew that. The case with Judge Engoron, the most overturned judge in the state, that is very close because they sent their team from the DOJ to help him. The district attorney, Alvin Bragg, that was all worked with. Again, they sent a top operative from the department, from the DOJ, Department of, I call it the Department of Injustice, because they're using the Department of Justice to rig the campaign. These cases are disgraceful. Now, they're brought, for the most part, in front of very hostile areas where Republicans get 3 or 4%, like downtown Manhattan, in front of very hostile judges, like hostile like you wouldn't believe. Judge Merchan, Judge Engoron, and Judge Kaplan, all of them hostile areas and very, very hostile judges. I've never seen anything like it. And very bad thing in this case, New York, very bad thing for New York. Businesses won't come to New York because of what took place with Judge Engoron. I can tell you that. And probably the rest of them also. But this case involved a woman who wrote a book, and I guess she said something in the book. That's when I first heard about it. I first heard about it in the White House. And, of course, I denied the story because it's not true. I have no idea who the woman is, and I never met her. Now, I don't know about a picture that was taken 40 years ago with her husband on a celebrity line, so I don't think that counts. But as far as I know, I never met her. I never touched her. I would have had no interest in meeting her in any way, shape, or form. Her husband was a news anchor, actually, John Johnson, a very nice guy. She called him horrible things. We weren't allowed to say that in the trial. She said horrible things about him. I guess they're since divorced. He's a very nice guy, African-American, and she said very bad things. We weren't allowed to use that in the trial, which surprised a lot of people. But she made up a story, it fabricated 100%, that I attacked her at Bergdorf Goodman. You know, it's very interesting. I don't think they were allowed to use this either. Her favorite show is Law and Order. And there's a almost exact story as her story in Law and Order about being attacked in the dressing room of a department store. I don't know if they used the name of the store. But that's her favorite show, Law and Order. She said that. And anyway, this evolved into a defamation case against me because I disputed her words because I told the truth. We were called. I was in the White House, and I said, no, it never happened. I didn't even know what they were talking about. This was, I think I was in the Oval Office. Sir, do you know anything about this? And this had to do with the book, and she had a few pages in a book making this claim. By the way, there was never a claim. There was never a police report. There was never anything mentioned. There was never publicity 30 or 40 years ago, whenever it took place. Nobody knows. She doesn't know when it took place. When did it take place? She has no idea. She thinks it was in the 1990s. She thinks it was in the 1990s. And the judge, we had two trials. We asked for a consolidation. He said no. The reason he said no is he'd rather have double the publicity, because that's bad for me. Very bad, because I'm running for president. And this is not the kind of publicity you like. And whether it's true or not, it's horrible. And in this case, it's so false. It's a made-up, fabricated story by somebody, I think, initially just looking to promote a book. And when they called me, I denied the story. I got sued essentially for defamation because I'm denying a story where I'm right. I should be suing her for defamation. So that's where it is. Now, there were two witnesses. One is a woman who's followed me for years. She said in 1979, I was in an airplane with her, commercial flight, and we became very intimate. I just sat down. I think I had the book, The Art of the Deal. I was famous then, too. I've been famous for a long time. And we're sitting in first class, according to her. Never happened, by the way. Totally made up story. She's a Clinton person, too, by the way, big Clinton person. She made up the story. And so many years ago, and I think it would be 1979, one of my many people behind me could correct it, but I think she said 1979, that's a long time ago. And I sat down. I believe I had some pretty big success then, and I was being talked about a lot. Maybe The Art of the Deal was out, sometime after that, I'm not sure. But I was well known. And passengers are coming into the plane. And she said I was making out with her. And then, after 15 minutes, and then she changed her story a couple of times, maybe it was quicker, that I grabbed her at a certain part, and that was when she had enough. Now, so think of the impracticality of this. I'm famous. I'm in a plane. People are coming into the plane. And I'm looking at a woman, and I grab her, and I start kissing her and making out with her. What are the chances of that happening? What are the chances? And frankly, I know you're going to say it's a terrible thing to say, but it couldn't have happened. It didn't happen. And she would not have been the chosen one. She would not have been the chosen one. She has gone around for years saying the story. Everywhere I go, she says this story. And it's a total lie. Now, I assume she'll sue me now for defamation, like I got sued by E. Jean Carroll, who interestingly said she's been hurt, damaged, but she's made more money since she did this than she ever made in her life. She gets paid a lot of money to go talk bad things about me. So remember this whole thing started, along with just about every other case I'm involved with the political campaign of Harris, and who's having a bad time because she can't talk, of Harris and Joe Biden. This was election interference. It all is. It's all fabricated. But fabricated in front of very friendly judges for them and in very friendly areas for them. If you get a jury, it's very hard to win in a jury where you have 3 or 4 or 5% Republican votes. Very, very tough, actually. Two witnesses. One is named Jessica Leeds. So she was up again. She can't get rid of her. She was up. She said I was in an airplane doing that. A couple of things. You have an armrest in planes back in those days. Oh, by the way, she didn't know anything about the flight, where we were going. Where I was in very few flights. I was a New York guy building New York buildings. I was in very few airplanes, I will tell you, in those days. 1979, I think. It's a long time ago. But you had the armrest, and in the old days, they didn't move. Okay? But she said she then got out, and she went to the back of the plane, and that was the end of the story, I think. And this story has followed me for years. But just to finish with her, Jessica Leeds, no police reports, no witnesses, no corroboration of any kind, no criminal suggestions, no nothing. Then you have another one, and this one is a writer for People magazine, who I actually thought was very nice. She came to Mar-a-Lago, and she wrote the most beautiful story you've ever seen. It was a love story about Melania and myself, a love story in People magazine. And that was it. It was a cover, I think, but it was a beautiful story. Everybody would love to have that marriage. She said the nicest things about me, about Melania. You have the story. I mean, you can read the story. And her name was whoever. Let's see. Her name was who? Swornoff, yeah. I don't have it. Whatever her name was. I don't know the lady, so perhaps it's much better that way, but I really don't know the lady. So she wrote this beautiful story, and about, I don't know, years later, no police reports, no anything. Years later, the same person they called up, did you attack at Mar-a-Lago this woman, this writer, whatever her name is? And she was a witness in a case. Her and Leeds were the two witnesses, only two witnesses. Did you attack her? I said, who is she? And they said, she writes for People magazine. I said, I don't know anything about the lady. I had a story long ago, years before, about People, but it was a very nice story. So I don't know. It has to be made up because I don't know what you're talking about. It turned out that the same lady that wrote this beautiful story years later said I attacked her. Now, think of this. Oh, and she said the butler knew everything. The old expression, the butler did it, right? Very famous in crime stories. Well, the butler was Tony Senecal, worked for me for a long time. He was retired at that time. That was years later, he retired. He was retired when this hoax came out. And what happened is he totally confirmed my story, and he didn't even work for me anymore. He passed away a couple of years ago, a good man. He said, the woman was crazy. It never happened. I was the one that served her whatever she was drinking, and I was there, and nothing ever happened. But you don't need the butler. All you have to do is read the story. Think of this. A woman comes into Mar-a-Lago, interviews me about a love story about my wife and myself. And during that interview, I attacked her and pushed her up against the wall violently. Okay? And then she leaves and she writes a perfect story. A perfect story. She doesn't mention the event. Again, there's nothing on file at all. Zero. There was no complaints. There were no complaints to People magazine. There was no witness. There was nothing. Yeah, well, there was a witness, the butler, and he's already said everything. He's already told the story. Because this story, likewise, like Leeds, this story has followed me around. I could go through many other stories outside of this. You know, it's very funny. When you're rich and famous, you get a lot of people come up with a lot of stories. But you're writers, and some of you are legitimate writers, and some of you aren't. Some of you are fake news, and some of you are real news. But put yourself in my position. I'm running for president, and I have all these cases all of a sudden come out. And they're fake cases, and they report back to DOJ. And you have Lisa Monaco, one of the people at DOJ who I saw the other day talking about the Russia hoax. And yet she's friends with Andrew Weissman and that whole group and crew, who should be sued, by the way, because they're not a charity. All they are is a political organization that goes after Trump for the last 8 years. I mean, he's a sick person that runs that, too. But Lisa Monaco is in the Department of Justice, but she's a Andrew Weissman person who's been after me for years. So far, he's failed. And he's having a heart attack because I'm leading in the polls. I guess if you look at the Nate Silver, very respected guy. I don't know him, but he has me up by a lot. So let's say we're leading, or let's say we're tied, or let's say what difference. I'm in the race. It's between two people, but I think we're leading by a lot because the opponent refuses to do an interview because she can't talk. And they're not going to skate through it. We're not going to have a Marxist president. The people are getting it. So we go down to court today to talk about this case is a scam. And all I can say is that I never met the woman other than this picture, which could have been AI generated. I don't know. Showed up out of nowhere, but it's fine. Nice picture with her, her husband, and lots of other people are online. It's a celebrity line. But never met her, never touched her, never had anything to do with her. The other thing is I was very famous then. If I would have walked into Bergdorf Goodman, the department store that she said, everybody would have said, oh, there's Trump. And it would have been, at that time, on page 6. Page 6 was the equivalent of today's internet. And it would have been a big story if I would have walked into that store, gone into a dressing room, and supposedly, you know what, to her. Never happened. Never happened. Total phony story. And I feel sad that I have to come up here and explain it. I have all this legal talent, but legal talent cannot overcome rigged judges. They can't overcome a 4% Republican area. And I'm disappointed in my legal talent, I'll be honest with you. They're good. They're good people. They're talented people. Today at the trial, they didn't mention the dress. So the Monica Lewinsky type dress was a big part of the trial. Big part of the trial. I said, why didn't you mention that? And I heard there was a dress involved. And I wasn't frightened at all because I did nothing with her. Never touched this woman, saw this woman, I had no idea who she was. But they have a dress, sir. I said, so what? Well, sir, it's very, sir. They used that dress to try and intimidate me. They used that dress with the public. That dress was such a famous dress. It was Monica Lewinsky, part 2, the dress. And the judge wanted it for trial. And it was going to go into trial. And then they found out there was nothing on the dress, which I knew. And then the judge wouldn't allow it to be used. So they used it as a cudgel. They used it as a hammer over my head. And then the judge, when he heard that it showed totally negative, the judge wouldn't allow us to use it at trial. Then there was an Anderson Cooper interview where she said essentially, no, he didn't rape me. She was selling her book. She wrote a book. The book would have been a total failure, probably was anyway, although probably sold more recently. Again, this is a woman that wasn't doing well until she came out with this stuff about me. And that's happened to others, too, by the way. She's not the only one. But they have the Anderson Cooper tape. And in the Anderson Cooper tape, it's an interview of her. And Cooper says something to the effect, did he rape you? Did he rape you? He was so happy. Oh, did he rape you? And she gave a very good answer for me, but a bad answer for CNN, for Anderson. And he said, we're going to commercial break right now. We're going. Then she came back from commercial break, and she was much more hostile. But this man wouldn't let us use the tape or the proper questions having to do with the tape. Wouldn't let us. The Judge Kaplan wouldn't let it be used. We wanted to get the outtakes. In other words, what did Anderson Cooper talk to her about during that intermission for a commercial that he called for immediately? Where do you see this? I mean, some of you have seen it, some of you haven't. We're going to commercial break right now. And so what happened is we weren't able to use it. The other thing is we had not one trial, we had two trials. Nobody understands why. We asked for a consolidation. And I wanted to show up to the trial, to the first trial. My lawyer, who's not up here, not with us any longer, sir, you should not show up.